to start with just a short prayer. Heavenly Father, we pray for each of us, again, for clarity, and as each of the students are learning, Lord, and I just really pray that you help us to notice that which it is that you want us to notice. Yeah, help us also just to have patience with ourselves and grace, and each of us to not be comparing ourselves to anyone else, Lord, but just simply comparing ourselves to where we have come from, and looking at that realistically, and remembering how far we've come, Lord, and then with excitement and hope how far yet we'll be able to go. And I pray that we can just apply this to anything and everything. So we pray it in the name of Jesus. Amen. Yeah, so we'll continue on with that. A couple of things struck me this morning before the class, and I thought it seems a bit appropriate to what we're doing, as I've talked with you guys about. A lot of drawing is being really, observational drawing. All drawing begins with observational drawing. Because it begins with observation, we can only go from what we see, and then that goes into our imagination, and we either are working from imagination or working from our eyes, or both of them. And much of what it comes down to is what we notice. An artist who is someone who is gifted, that God has gifted as an artist specifically. Each of us has some amount of the gift, but as we know, God gifts everyone with different amounts. But it comes, what they know is they notice things, and it was just struck to me. Well, let me explain again what I mean. If we look at my own little picture here, an artist is going to naturally, without even thinking about, they're going to notice what this curve is doing and how this curve goes. They're going to notice things like that even though this animal is walking along the ground, because of perspective, the tail is much lower on the page than the front feet. Things like that. Not even being aware that they're noticing it. But it's just interesting. I was just struck in life. And I often think about our own lives as works of art. And really what we're called to do is work with God, our Creator. And as He's started us, He's given us, we start in His imagination, we're conceived in His imagination, then we're conceived in the womb of our mother, of course, and then we're formed and shaped as just a start, but we really start life as a blank canvas, and then we go through the rest of our life creating with Him. And I suppose our parents kind of start off, our parents start putting the first things down. But again, so much about notice. What do we notice and what do we pay attention to in life? And especially at this time, what do we pay attention to and what do we need to disregard? And so often, especially with all the news and everyone telling us what we're supposed to think about this COVID thing, and where do we actually turn our focus to? So that's just sort of interesting, something to think about. So let's get back to our little drawing here. And that's, again, the whole deal is, what am I supposed to pay attention to as an artist? And one thing that I've talked to you guys about is try to train yourself to notice curves, notice shapes. What is the shape of the ear on this one, in this case, this little aardvark? Okay, and we don't just think eye or nose, but what shape is this? And that's what we have to notice. Those are the things we notice. And we notice what is highest on the page, what is farthest to the left or to the right, all of that. So as I taught you, one of the things that helps us to notice that, instead of noticing and focusing on this as an animal, an aardvark, we turn it upside down. So I'm going to do that for this drawing. I don't normally do this on my own so much, simply because I've done it enough and I'm to that point. But for this exercise, I'm going to do so. I'm going to use this just as a helpful tool Now, as a teacher, I've had a whole bunch of these made up, and my students use them. But as grid drawing, and you may have seen that, you could go online and see grid drawing. I'm sure there's like 100 YouTube videos on how to do grid drawing. This is a practice that goes all the way back to the Renaissance. I always thought it was cheating when I was a kid, but it's not cheating at all. Leonardo da Vinci, all those guys, they all worked with, maybe not all, but definitely there's evidence that they worked with grids. So I'm just going to use this one, and I've highlighted 2 of the lines so I can just focus, because it just helps us to help. It's hoping to really stress to you guys to notice our verticals and or horizontals and how do things relate in that way. And I could even use this for measuring the length of things. Let's say I can see that this leg is about 1 square long, roughly. It's a little bit longer than that, ever so slightly. And I can compare that to something else, okay? So by doing that, for example, this shows me, if I actually come up to here, right up to where the leg meets the underside of this aardvark, or I should be using terms like this. I should use where this line, because as I said, it's not a leg, where these lines meet these lines, and then that gives me a sense of how long those lines are. Well, they're longer than a square. If I go back to this one, I can see how much shorter this part is. So it makes me know to, okay, so when I draw this compared to that, I need to make sure this is shorter than this, okay? All those sort of things. It helps me get a sense of angles, okay? So I can see that roughly this does curve, but it does end up being roughly 45 degrees because it goes from corner to corner. So it helps me get a sense of that. So where do we begin? That's usually one of the first questions.
Rick,
Yes.
Rick, a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you bought, or did you make it?
I made these, yeah. So this is just, remember they used to have the overhead projectors? It's harder to find this.
Oh, okay. It's the plastic.
Yeah, it's just that plastic transparency that, and I was able to, you can still find them in a few stores. I think Staples still has them, but they're definitely harder to come by. One time I had to order them online, and then I simply used a printer. I made up these are 1-inch grids. I made them up myself on just a Word document, and then printed it onto this transparent. And then I number them for the students because it helps. And then what we actually do is you tape it to this, and we might do this as an exercise, and then you draw a grid on your paper lightly, and then you draw your animal and you match your grids up. So it's helpful also for enlarging. If you're going to make something twice as big, then you simply make your squares twice as big. But for now, I'm just going to use it to kind of guide, and so you guys can see because in my mind, the lines are invisible. This is simply help make the lines visible for you guys. So where do we begin? Well, we really begin with the whole thing. I'm going to set this aside for a moment. The best place that I would always suggest is to begin with the whole. First, I kind of call it mapping out or laying in or putting in a framework or whatever it may be, is to find those sort of shapes. And here I see this is sort of like a bit of an egg shape. So I might get that bulk of the body here. I'm not going to worry about this curve yet. I can take care of that later. So I'm going to just lightly put that in just to get it started. And this will help me also determine my proportions. So I'm going to call it the head, the head, legs, tail, but, and yeah, so head, legs, tail, how big are they in comparison, in relation to the thorax, the body of him. So this is all going to have to get, changed. But what does matter to me right now is the proportion. Do I have my shape here, the height and the width, are they relative? Well, again, that's where this is kind of handy. One artist might use a pencil, so I can measure like this. And okay, so that's from the top of this shape to here to the bottom. And then I go from here and I see it's about 1.5 roughly. Okay, so this length is about 1.5 times the height. I could use that with my grid. So if I put one end of my grid over here, I see it's 1, 2, 3, 4 roughly. Okay, it's about 4 squares long. And does that match? Okay, here's my height. It's roughly 2 squares. Okay, so I can get that accuracy in later, but basically my shape here now should be twice as long as high. Okay, and you want to test these things right from the start. I put down my first shape and everything is going to build off this shape. So I want to make sure that that's accurate right away from the start. Now, as you get going and or in years and you're doing this and doing this, you will begin to just see it. You don't have to measure it. You're just going to look at one shape and look at that and you just feel right away that it's right. You just know, that it's right. Okay, because it ends up being more of a feeling. But for now, when we're learning, we want to check it. So here's my height, here's my width. Okay, and it's roughly, now if I measured this, this was a little bit higher. So this is 4 and this was a little bit higher. So it's, if I'm going to err, I'm going to err on it being not quite 1.5. So it looks like I could extend this, but the tail is going to extend anyway. So it's going to extend a little bit more this way. Okay, so that tells me right now. So I see that right now, and that's going to be helpful to me. I see this is much more of an angle here, and I'll fix that later on. All I want to do right now is now get the size of this. So if this is about 4 long, this from here to there, okay, this is about another 1.5, so a little bit, and that goes on at about roughly a 45-degree angle. Again, sort of shape. Now, also right away, I need to pay attention, and this is what is helpful with my lines here. Let me show you this, because my first temptation is to put it right here. And I'll just put that in. I might do this, okay, and think that's roughly that shape there. But this is right away, I have to check my horizontals. And what I notice is if I put a horizontal across the bottom of this shape, look how much higher that is on the page, way up there. It's not down here. I just drew it way down here. And so right away, if I don't check that, I'm going to have problems right from the start. And I'll be so far in, I'll have drawn all the details, and then later on, I won't understand what's not looking right. So again, that's what you notice. Okay, so if I just think of a head and a body, and I think, oh, the head attaches to the body here. No, it's a shape. So this has to definitely move up. And how close does it get to there? Okay, so I can check that. So if this is roughly about my vertical there, or my horizontal going there, I can see it's ways there. It's about the same. So the distance from here to here, this line, and there to there is about the same. So this can sort of help me. I can roughly, again, because I'm just learning to do this, put in I just draw in my invisible lines. You probably can't even hardly see them, but I'm putting in rough. And then this needs to come down to here, roughly a 45-degree angle to about here. And I go back and I look, and it's right away, it's good to start practicing. Can you do this also visually without measuring? Can I get this? And maybe it's good to start clarifying some of this shape right away. Okay. And begin, fix it up a little bit. And I'm thinking it's even, now I'm starting to feel it needs to come this way more. Okay, so I'm gonna give a little bit more shape to that. Do these lines nice and loose and light. So you'll see, notice how I hold my pencil. I'm not doing it like this. I'm holding my pencil way back here. Should probably have a bigger pencil, but anyway. Okay, so get them nice and close. See my angles, looking pretty good. This I can start to give a little more definition to that. And now what about this shape going way off over here? how far does that, see that comes, that's much higher on the page. So it's, may as well get that in place right away. Okay, so that's the first thing, is that location. So it's like 1.5 squares higher up than that, and this was about 2. So I go back to my page here. If that's roughly 2, it's going to go 1.5. So it's going to be roughly about that high on the page. Okay, somewhere over here. Now this is the beauty of drawing animals just when you begin, because there's so much room for making mistakes and it still looks okay. All right. Because honestly, if that tail in my drawing ends up here or here, it's barely going to make any difference. Okay. But you want to practice accuracy, because later on, if you're drawing something like a face, it is so important that you get that nose in the right place in the mouth, or it just stands out and it just reeks of inaccuracy and it just will bother you, as opposed to, so that's why I never begin with having people draw the face or the human body. It's just, if you're going for observational drawing and learning, just for encouragement. Okay, so this is going to be somewhere about here. Now I'm just looking at it, it feels like it's a little too high in my page. Okay, now also my guy is going to be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go about here so I can see, in order to retain that angle. So now I'm going just by sight, and what it's just feeling. It just, when does it feel when I'm looking back and forth? When am I recognizing similarity and familiarity? Okay, so we're going to rough that in. And now I see this is going to maybe have to come a little bit higher. And I'm looking at this, seeing that needs to come a little bit lower. And I'm feeling my angle needs to be off. It is really interesting. You have to be careful about, when you're learning, to not trust your grid, because it is often, it's interesting how your feeling will be off at first. I have so often where especially drawing a human face, I always will draw it too wide. Where you draw the human body, naturally you'll draw the arms, the legs too short. You'll draw the head too big. There's some natural tendencies that we see it and we feel it wrong. And so that's why using the pencil, using something as a measuring tool. Okay, so let's go ahead and get these shapes in here. Where are they going to be? Checking my verticals, my horizontals. Okay, so they line up roughly with this here. Okay, so where is that on my page or on my drawing? That's roughly about here. Okay, so I want to get those. So from left to right, I want to make sure I get those in the right place. And now, how high on my page does this go? Okay, again, I can measure, what is this similar to? Okay, so that's 1 square. Okay, can I find something else on my page that is 1 square? Roughly the head. Okay, from here to here is about 1 square. So it's got to be close to that. Okay, so that gives me an idea here. I'm not going to use a square because mine's a little bit bigger. So, but I can use my pencil and go like this, and go like this, and I see that mark there, and that tells me roughly this is where these, we'll go ahead and call them legs, but these shapes, these legs, need to be fit in right about right there. Okay, so now that's a very complex sort of shape, but I can see it has a bit of an ovalish here. Okay, so it looks like an oval, basic forms. Okay, and then that's a cylinder shape, and it's on an angle, so I pay attention, that's on a bit of an angle. And this oval is about roughly right in there. How high does this oval come up? Or how low, I mean, on my page? It's about even with that, maybe where that eye is, so maybe I Should get my eye drawn in. Okay, now I noticed I hadn't had this before, so I need to have that in there. So let's start to darken this just a little bit. And let's get that eye, that shape in. And now I'm just looking back and forth at the two. Okay, so I'm just laying that in there, trying to make sure where is it compared to that. And I see it's actually a little bit high, needs to come down more. Okay, so it's more even inside there, trusting that that is there in the right place. Okay, so that's going to go there. So that now tells me, now I know to put my oval at about this point to start off that leg, and it goes on an angle, and I get that. So that helps me determine this line, which helps get that, and then, okay, and that now helps me create that shape. Okay. And now I can begin to define this. Looking a little big. This feels like it needs to be a bit bigger there, so I'm going to move that. Okay. So we have that. Now we have this one all the way back here. So once again, we have our big oval. It comes a little bit higher, lower, sorry, comes a little bit lower. And where is it? Well, it's way near the back end. So it's roughly around right here. Let's use my, let's compare it between this. And it's roughly about, approximately about halfway. So the distance from here, okay, from there to there and there to there is less than half. So it should fit right in about even. So if that line extends and I extend there, then this back one should come to roughly around right there. Okay, so this is my last shape there. And so let's go ahead and lay in this big oval to about there. Try to get that as accurate. Let's take a look. Let's notice this is on such a slight angle. It's not straight up and down. Like this was pretty straight up and down. So it's such a slight angle. And it's about there. That's a curved line. So we lay in that curved line there. And now we start to define this line here. This needs to be a little bit thicker. That line there coming up, and then this little shape, which we actually know is the other foot. We see that's even just a little bit higher than that one on our page. So we got that. And then just rough that in. We have this little shape over here yet. We don't have that in. That comes a little bit to the right beyond that one. Okay, and now this really needs to get defined in here because this one looks fat. So let's not forget about that. So this line, this is the background. So that can get confusing. So now we change and fix this up and we see, get that nice and close. So this comes here, more of an angle like that. And then it something more like that. And we define this one in here, okay? Let's get, before I get into those details, let's make sure I have everything else good. And I have these shapes here, which, let's take a look. If we use our horizontal lines, right away we see that they come lower on the page than this does. And let's check our verticals. I have the eye, hopefully, I have this shape accurate. So I can see vertically, those line up. Those line up, so I know how far to go with that. So line up, so that one. I like to tell myself, where does the shape end? Okay, so I just put that little indication, and now I can, that's on an angle. That angle there, I want to make sure I get that correct. And then this line almost goes vertical, almost exactly vertical. So that's important, but not quite. And then it comes to about there. And then this one leans forward. This, notice, once again, get my horizontal line, and I see that's ever so slightly lower in the page. So ever so slightly lower. Where is that coming vertically? To about there, to check my vertical. And I see where it's first going to put it, but was not quite far enough. So it needs to come more there. But then I'm looking, that's not looking right either. So it's somewhere more in between. Perhaps this one. So now I just have to look. Okay, so that comes a little bit higher to about like that. Okay. Now we have our basic form. Okay, when I'm looking at this, let's start to get this is important. This shape, so let's okay, now I see this shape is too thick as well. So now, but I have it in the right position, so that's good, and that matters. Position is very important, okay? It's very important that you get things in the right position, location. You could probably even break all that down. Is position first, and then angle and whatever. Let's get that. And now I can go in and check it out. Let's just flip things over to get an idea of now our accuracy. Okay. And now that now we can go by feeling. How does it feel? Does it feel like the aardvark that I've got? Okay. And I think it's pretty good there. This feels like this needs to actually come lower. I didn't quite come to that line. So let's, okay. So I've got all sorts of construction lines in here. And this is where I would maybe switch to a different pencil. I've been working with an HB. I like to just usually lay in with HBs. Every artist is going to have their own preference. What do you start with? Sometimes I'll start with an H pencil, just a little bit harder to keep my lines lighter. You do have to be careful when you get with a harder pencil that you will sometimes dent and you'll leave actual little grooves in your paper, and you go to erase that, and later when you shade it, you can't escape that. So, all right. Okay, so we can get this background in. I'm just going to keep it face up. This doesn't really matter. Now these, of course, when I talk more about rhythm lines, this is more of a rhythm line. Okay, so I see a difference here. By drawing this in, I've suddenly noticed a difference here to here, and this is much higher. And now I need to check that, because yes, I see that. This on the page is lower there, so something is very different. And I can notice that now, and I can start to fix that. So this comes up here, and I see, yeah, what's happening here is my tail at this point is too thin. It's got to be lower. And I think here, so the whole thing, yeah, okay, which helps with get that angle, and then this gets a little bit lower. So this is where it's important. And then this line is also not quite in the right place. That needs to come more right here, okay? And this would actually be higher on my page. Not that it matters. If it's okay if we show a little bit of background there, but again, we're just trying to learn accuracy. These grass lines, this is one of those rhythm sort of lines. You don't have to get the exact same zigzags, you know, how many zigs and how many zags, that doesn't matter. This is where you're just trying to do that rhythm sort of line too. Mine's starting to look more like flame than it does grass. It's because they're too wide apart. Right, and they see they drew a little ant hill right here, just to probably trying to indicate this is a coloring page. So we've got a little ant hill, and they've got some flowers to put our little guy in his environment. But we're not going to focus on that so much right now. Now let's start to get in details. Now this one does not have any shading, so I'm not going to bother trying to shade this, and that's okay. We don't need to. I want to get my eraser because my line got too dark. Again, erasers. You decide. Some artists, teachers will tell you it's a horrible thing to use an eraser. That's their prerogative. That's fine. If they feel using an eraser kills the opportunity for happy accidents or things like that, sure, I can. I know what they're talking about. That does make sense. But I just don't like. I don't like the whole idea of determining how things have to be. There has to be some sort of freedom for you to be yourself as an artist, and let yourself grow. And if you need to use an eraser because that's where you are, my goodness, use your eraser. If that's where you're at in your journey, use it and feel free to use it. Okay, so we're again, see, I've got all these wonderful guidelines to tell me now where to put all these lines in. And this is a bit more of a sketchy line to indicate the fur that these aardvarks have. Fur. Saw an aardvark actually when we were in Kenya once at night. It was very quick. He was in our headlights, lumbering along. I don't remember him being so furry. I just remember him being kind of pink and gray. And those pointy rabbit ears. That was one of our fun adventures. Okay, so we get that. Now we're getting this shape. I can see that it's a little bit, well, maybe not. I thought it was a little bit too far forward, but I think that's okay. Laying this in, we'll get some of these. Okay, so again, this is the rhythm line. This is the type of line where you don't worry about, you have the right number of zigs and zags or like that. So now I'm really paying attention still. I'm remembering my initial lines were just guidelines. Now I'm really going off when it feels, it just feels like it's right. It feels like it's in the right place. Almost have like pig legs or pig feet a bit. Not quite, except that they got claws. Fascinating little guys, aardvarks. Okay. Nice swoop. Want to get that feel of the swoop there. So sound effects are fantastic when you're drawing. Give yourself some sound effects. Get into it. Looks like a carrot, this tail here. whatever you can do to enjoy yourself.
I had to laugh at that one. Looks like a carrot.
Yeah.
I like the idea of sound effects too.
Yeah, I started all my drawing was cartooning. I'd create my own little worlds, and of course in my world sound was happening. So I was making all sorts of sounds as I was drawing.
Great. Sound effects make everything better.
Exactly. Glad you guys agree with me there. So, all right, there's too much detail, I think, too many lines in his head here. Okay, and as an artist, it's important for you to make decisions. Just because that artist, and this is from another artist, because another artist drew that in there doesn't mean I need to draw all those in there. I don't particularly like that many lines in there. Okay, and this is a good way to start, is to work from another person's drawings are so helpful and handy. When I was a college student, I was in Europe. We went to the galleries there, and I was struck by the students, the art students there, sitting there copying from the masters. Oh my goodness, how wonderful would that be to see the actual real masters? So they work from copying from other artists. Now, do remember, even for something like this, we don't want to plagiarize. So I can't go turn this into something and claim this as my own, because I'm copying another artist here. This is just for my own practice. I'm not going to try and make money off of this or anything like that. So, but anyway, so I think this gives enough indication of how to go about it. Let's put in a little bit of shadowing here. I always like just a little bit of loose shadowing, just it helps us see where is the ground. Try to have them not floating on the page. We don't want, so there's a little bit of a slope there. I'm just holding my pencil differently because yeah, so you'll learn to change how you're holding your pencil from this to this. You know, when does it get really accurate and all that sort of stuff. You know, when are you shading this way? Now, I suppose I could lay in a little bit of shading. Let's get rid of a few construction lines here. Again, that's a personal preference. Do you want to keep those lines? Because they can often add a lot to the piece. Just keeping it loose, keeping it alive, almost like a blurry, when an artist, photographer specifically blurs a photograph, let's say of an Olympic runner or any sort of sports movement, they use blur on purpose. So I think these, some of these loose, soft lines will add some of that. So there is something definitely to speeding up your line, but you don't want to lose accuracy by doing that. So,
Rick,
yeah.
I'm trying to figure out why I like yours better. What is it about there? I don't know if it's the lines are so harsh on theirs. It just looks a little too busy or something.
Better than this one. I think there's too much in here.
Yeah.
Like I said, in here, there's too much. You don't need that much to indicate this is a furry, and yet I don't think they're really furry. Anyway, but that there's too much in here.
Yeah.
And they're starting to, it's also taken away the feeling of highlight and shadow, because that's, we can't quite tell where our light source is. Well, if this shadow is going this way, then our light source has to be over here. Then this shouldn't be so dark here, and things like that. So if I'm going to put my light source over here, we've got this.
Yours looks like a happy aardvark. His is kind of an angry aardvark.
Yeah, because he's got that harsh line there.
Yeah.
He's having a bad day. None of the ants came out for him, I guess. I don't know.
Grumpy.
Yeah. So I also noticed on his nose, I didn't like those two lines, so I took them out. I just left that there.
Can I show you mine, Rick?
You betcha. Yes.
I didn't do any artistic interpretation. I was just trying to copy. So.
That's great. That's a great place.
Oh wait, I
to
can turn on
begin.
my camera.
Yeah, that'll be helpful. So
That'd
let
be
me
helpful.
switch to gallery view here.
Oh my gosh, I don't know how to get it in the right spot. I can't see. Oh, there we go.
Oh my goodness, that is wonderful. That is fantastic.
I did try to like put it over the top to to see if I would have traced it. It doesn't match up, but it looks like it matches up even though it doesn't, right?
Yeah, like yeah. So the one thing that really stands out and probably would have been the most important thing is
What?
the proportion between the head and the legs. Did you get that correct? And it's very, very accurate.
It is.
Yeah, I'd say it's quite accurate. It's not 100%, but it's so it feels good. You know what I mean? If you had that head too small, you would just feel it. It just wouldn't feel right.
So I used my pencil as a measuring tool for the head and the overall octopus. And then I let go of measuring everything after that because I didn't want to be like, oh, me.
Exactly. Especially, yeah, it's going to get so tight that you won't have the flow. Your line won't, like as you draw those legs in, your line has to flow so it will feel flowing. So
Right. So I had, and I did erase a couple times, like if
sure.
the flow of the leg, because you have to do two sides, and so and it has to go from wide to more narrow, but also be both sides have to be flowy, but be the right distance with the tips.
Yeah, and that's why it's often when you're drawing, it's an artist here. Let me put it back on mine a second so I can show. When you're drawing a line and something to avoid, so let's say I have to do the line of this here, okay? And if all of you guys can look at this for a second, this is one thing I would discourage is doing this sort of thing, where you're trying to get that going, okay? I feel it's like stuttering. Now we might use that as a way to build a construction line and then we build off of that, but it just feels so stuttery to me. These are two different ways I've seen artists, and what I'd rather do myself is make a long line and then redraw it until and try to go through the whole line till you get it, okay? So I'm drawing 5 lines here, 5, 6 lines, but I keep doing it till I finally get it. And then the next one. And, okay? And so this is gonna have flow. This stutters and stumbles. It gets down the path, and the path is even accurate, but it has a stumbly sort of effect to it. This is a flowing, and now I can just lay that in there, okay? Now, another thing that artists will often do is sort of something in between this, where they will lay that curve in definite straight lines. I'm sort of exaggerating here, but like if they're drawing a nose or head, is you first using straight lines, and then that gives you your direction, and now you can flow along.
That looks like vector art.
It looks like, yeah. Now my line's got a little bit long, but often, like for instance, if you're trying to draw a circle and you're trying to get your circle accurate, one way you can do it is to actually start off with a square, and an accurate square. Oh, you can hardly see me. It should be working bigger, really, to show. Let me do this bigger, okay? So if I draw a square, and this is sculpting. This is drawing as if you're sculpting, because this is how a sculptor works. They start with the square, and how do I turn it into a circle? You should take off your corners. So I take off my corners, and this is sort of, and then you take off your corners, and you keep taking off your corners, and that one got bad. And if you keep doing this, so this is just to show the principle of removing corners and how that can turn into a really smooth, accurate line. So if you are trying to do the muscle, the bicep or the calf on a leg, and you really want to get that curve, you do it with square lines. So I haven't drawn a single curved line. I'm drawing square lines, but what I'm ending up with is a wonderful circle in the middle there. And that's kind of what I was trying to show there. So using a series of straight lines in that way, that's as opposed to this sort of stuttery sort of thing. You know, it's.
So Rick,
Mhm.
I have a question. I think the way I did it was totally different, and maybe it's a bad habit to not get into, but when I'm trying to do a curvy line, I turn my paper so that I can rest my hand on the paper, and then I go like that.
Yeah, no, there's
And then I
nothing wrong
turn
with
it,
that.
and then I go, you know.
There's nothing wrong with that at all.
Get
No,
away with
that's, yeah, look at this. I mean, look at that natural arc.
Right.
We do that all the time as an artist, right?
Okay.
This is why a lot of artists will also train themselves to work with their left hand. Because if you are getting large and you're drawing from, let's say, a model, and you're drawing or this full size, and you need an arc going in that direction, a really nice arc, you're right. It's harder to do this than it is this, and just use that wrist in the arm, in the shoulder, you know, and in university, you know, to draw from your shoulder. Now, you don't have a big piece of paper, but it just increases all of that there. Yeah. So again, everything I tell you, try not to think of it as wrong or right, but just which produces the best fruit, you know, that you like. So, all right. So Teresa, if you can hold up yours again, actually, or maybe I don't know if you can see it, maybe you need to look at it first. So if I may, just because this would be like now if I see myself as your coach, like a coach of an Olympian athlete, we're going to get really picky. We'll back it away a little bit. Back, it's a little too close. All right. Now, there's something between the relationship of the bottom two legs, and I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to see if you can find it, and it's just one example of an inaccuracy, which in your octopus is not standing out, but if you're drawing a human face, it would really stand out. So see if you can see something in the
bottom two legs.
Yeah, and the relationship between those two. Maybe while you're looking for that.
I noticed when I did it, this opening wasn't as big.
Okay.
Yep.
That's exactly. Now, so the way to take a look at yours. Now, take a look at the relationship of that opening and compare it to the eyes of the octopus, and then you'll see where is it in relationship to the eyes of the octopus.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Isn't that something? See how it's suddenly, whoa, there it is. Now I see it.
That's way wackadoodle. Yeah.
So that's not to point out, that's not to say that, you know, I don't want to point out something.
Oh yeah, this leg is way too fat. Okay. Theirs is more narrow, so this comes over more. Yeah. Okay. That's good. But on the other hand, I think I did try to change it, because when I looked at this, it looked weird, like his body, it felt like he didn't have enough body there.
Yeah. So this is exactly, so this is why all I'm pointing out to you is, can you see it? That's all I'm looking for. You don't have to change it.
Right. But I think I kind of did make a decision to, I didn't realize that, but I kind of subconsciously made that decision, because I said, oh, something looks weird about this one, and I modified it. But now that I think about it, octopuses are like that. They don't really have a body. Their legs are just like that. So actually, it's not weird now that I look at it.
Well, but it's okay. And again, the thing I want to point out, Teresa, is I'm not telling you have to change it, right? Mm-hmm. Keep what you want, because in the end, what matters is your drawing, not the photo you worked from. All I was just checking is, can you see and can you notice it? And you can. Right. And there you go. And that's what's important.
And I was trying to copy it, but then,
yeah. Huge success. So I'm gonna, yeah, I'll show you guys where
And I figured out that I love drawing octopuses because they have flowy arms, and I like that.
Yeah, that's fun.
I'm gonna draw more.
How about Elizabeth or Katie? You guys have anything? Oh, you guys are muted. There we go. Who's going? Let me just pause a second. Okay, okay, back it away a little bit.
I'm glad you didn't record my interlude.
Yeah,
Good.
no, it was perfect.
Well, okay, I'm gonna have to see the picture you're working, so I don't know if you can hold them up both together. And then
This one.
still, there we go.
Oh.
Okay, you're gonna have to move it over. There we go. Yep, move it over a little bit more. Okay, so this is what's really cool is I see that how you're drawing it is you're drawing it as you're seeing like that top line that goes up into the nose. You're actually seeing that as shape. So that's awesome. You're not drawing that just as a line, and you're drawing the shape quite accurately. You're not trying to draw a nose. You're drawing really what you see there. So hold your drawing. I'm thinking just a bit of an angle. Looks like you've flattened the angle out a little bit. Yeah, that's about the only thing that I see happening on it that you might, and again, it's a wolf. A wolf in your final drawing, he could certainly tilt his head down a little bit. And all that matters is, do you see that? So do you see how your angle is flatter? You've made it more horizontal. He's got his head tilted back more than
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now that's going to affect everything. As you got to make sure now when you draw his bottom jaw, because everything is going to end up a little bit out of alignment. So you'll have to sort of continue on with that. I think you could perhaps push that nose shape. Looks, if I'm comparing, it's hard to tell because your camera's a little bit blurry. So yeah, it may need to get a little bit further away. It feels a little bit too close to the eye shape. You'll have to take a look and compare.
Further here.
Yeah, I think so. And it looks a little bit big, a little bit on the large side. I think it looks a little large and a little close. So that may just end up affecting when you're finished with it. That it's going to look like he has more of a shorter snout in the end. But I really like your approach to this. And
Thank you.
Yeah, that's cool. So the only encouragement I would give is before you start drawing them all these other lines and details, the fur that comes down his face and everything, is try to sort of, as I say, map it out and try to make sure you're getting your location in place. Otherwise, you spend so much time drawing these wonderful, accurate shapes, and if they're not in the right location, it's frustrating because you put so much time into it, and then you have to move it. You have to erase it, move it, redraw it, and it just takes so much longer. So definitely on the track, Katie. Awesome.
All right. Thank you.
You betcha. Let's see, Elizabeth. Do you have anything, either what you did now or what you did before?
Yeah. Hold on.
Okay. There's your drawings. Very cool. And if you can, so just at first glance, they look at, okay, yeah, there we go. Okay, it's probably kind of, I don't know if you can, maybe let's just do the cat first. Can you actually hold your paper up by the screen? Do you not have 3 hands, Elizabeth?
Oh.
Because you're trying to hold everything so much. My goodness. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yep. Hold. Yep. Okay. Now hold it.
Oh, and a corgi.
That's so good. All right. Really good. Okay. So the first thing I want to point out, let's talk about the cat a minute. Okay. Is the proportions of the head to, like, see, in his body and his tail become one sort of shape. So proportionate size, you've actually got that quite accurate. Okay, you can maybe make the body part a little bit bigger in proportion to that. So I like that. You put the cat's head on an angle. You didn't miss that. You caught that and noticed, yep, the cat's head is on an angle. So you nailed that one. And his ear, I guess on his right or his left, you have the one ear sticking up higher than the other. So you nailed that one. So really good. So now we'll just point out a few things that we noticed that are different, because that's also important, is where you put his eyes and nose is a little bit big and a little bit high up on the head. So his forehead is now smaller than in the one that you were copying there. Okay, so so you can probably, I think you probably see that already. The curve, I love the curve in his tail that you created up. And you can probably see it has a bit of a different feel. Yours has a bit of a squishy sort of feel, which is fun. But again, as long as you can notice differences, that's all that matters. And then his ear, the furthest thing to the left on the drawing you're working from, not counting the whiskers, is the ear. His ear is actually further to the left than the cheek, if you were to draw a vertical line there. Whereas in your drawing, the cheek is further to the left than the ear. See that? Okay, so those are all some really good things. Your feet, the one foot is on an angle, which I like better. So you change that. But in this case, so as long as you see the difference, that's all that matters. But I like yours on an angle better. You did it, that's much more interesting than on the drawing you work from, where all three are in perfect line. So that's a little composition thing where you actually improved it. To it. So that's excellent. Okay, hold it up, put the dog above the dog or something like that, so I can sort of see those two near each other. And then if you can hold that still, there we go, and let the kind of, okay, yeah, very good. Your proportions, I think, are really nice. The size of the head compared to the body is quite accurate. Yours is a little bit taller. So that's, again, it looks fine, but again, we just looked to, what can we see? And we're always working at that, is trying to see. His little pointy, I guess that's like not quite his chin, looks like maybe that's some of his fur. That comes to a point right below the nose and mouth. Do you see that pointy line there? So on yours, the point is on the left side of the nose, and on the drawing there, it's more directly underneath, or a little bit more on the right. So those are the sort of things that you really want to practice for growth. So because that helps you advance to getting into more complex things. So in the end, in your drawing, it doesn't matter. And like I said, in some things, I like yours better. Okay, you've made some improvements on the drawing. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. All you just need to know for yourself in your head is, can you see the difference? That's what matters. Okay, and that's what you always want to be working at, is that. So you guys can certainly keep practicing these. I'm gonna pause it. Let's just pause.